Hey everyone, thanks for being here for our panel on Compose. Really excited for this. With all the talks happening about Compose, I'm sure everyone else is. It's a great chance to get your questions answered. My name's Joe Birch and I'm moderating the panel today. We've got a team from Google here who are going to introduce themselves.
I guess I'll get started. I'm Anna-Chiara. I am a product manager on Jetpack Compose.
I'm Clara. I'm one of the tech leads on Jetpack Compose.
Hello, I'm Andrey. I'm software engineer in Jetpack Compose team.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm one of the engineers in Android Developer Relations.
Hello, I'm Jose, also a developer relations engineer.
Hi, it's Manuel, also part of the same team.
And hi, my name is Nick Butcher. I'm also on the Android Developer Relations team working on Compose. And just want to say a quick thank you to Joe Birch for agreeing to moderate this panel. Cheers, Joe.
No problem at all. Yeah, thanks for all the introductions. With that in mind, we've got a lot of questions to get through, so I'd love to get started now. First one we've got on the list is, what's the APK impact when adding Compose to an existing project? Are there any plans for navigation component or other common layouts like lazy grid, swipe refresh, or view pager?
All right, I'll take the first one about APK size. It's hard to tell exactly right now because currently Compose is pulling app.compat and fragments, even if you're not using them. So I did a couple of quick checks before this, and the size of small sample apps like OWL are 9 megs in debug, in the debug build config, and 2.2 when minified. So I think it's safe to say that the impact is not huge, but too early to say, definitely.
I think I can take the second part of the question. So about lazy grids, we are currently working on them already, so should be coming at some point. View pager, we didn't yet started, but it's planned, and nice thing is that we already have some sample implementation of it in one of our samples, Jetcaster. We can copy it from there temporary until we have official solution. About swipe refresh, it is not a part of material design, so we will probably not have it right in Compose, but maybe we will provide it, or we will make it simple to implement, or we will have some external library for it. So yeah, we are thinking about it.
Nice. So related to that, there's a question on navigation. So the person said the most burning question is navigation on Compose. Implementing your own is tricky, and without it in any app, which has more than one screen, is hardly possible. This is personally something that I'm also quite interested in.
I can take this one as well. I agree that it is the most burning question right now. The good news is that the team is on it. There's already a code change in AOSP. You can check it out. And right now we're missing basic stuff like navigation arguments, but it's being developed right now. So the API looks very simple to use, and I suspect it's going to be much simpler than the navigation architecture component actually, and more flexible since everything is Kotlin and we can do probably more advanced stuff easily.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of promo, tomorrow in the Composing Existing Apps, Chris and I will be talking about navigation. So we'll cover a little bit of the APIs there. So don't miss it.
Nice. Alongside that, are there any plans on providing a navigation library or any form of guidelines alongside that, as well as integration with deep links? The person's also asked, another major topic is DI, and are there any other plans to tackle that at the same time?
Yeah, I can talk about this one. So there are plans, like as I said, we'll cover tomorrow, there are plans to support the nav arguments, also deep links. So that's all of that is in the navigation compose extension pipeline. So the team is working pretty hard on this, and that's definitely in there. And then regarding dependency injection, so we are considering how to best integrate Hilt into Compose. So the team, as I was saying, is experimenting with few ideas, see what we can do, what we cannot do. So as well, there were some questions about ambience and how they could play around with Hilt. Basically, like they are completely the opposite if you think about it. Like ambience as kind of this service locator pattern versus fully composed or fully dependency injection solution. The truth is that we could, like at the moment, we could match them together, and we could make ambience to be like compiled and check that compile time. And so the team is experimenting. We have a few ideas in mind. And so stay tuned that we'll try to get the best of it as soon as possible.
Nice. Yeah, I've just started using Hilt quite a lot myself, so I'd love to see more developments there. Next question is, does Compose support nested scrolling events for outer views that aren't migrated to Compose?
I'll take that one, I guess. So Compose view, which is kind of the layer between the view system and your Compose code, that does support two-way touch conversion. So for like motion events, it works, but Compose currently doesn't have any support for nested scrolling. So it doesn't have support internally, so there's no way you can create nested scrolling type gestures in Compose. But that also means that there's no kind of outward layer, so there's no way you can output view system nested scrolling events either. So the answer is no at the moment, but we are looking at it, so stay tuned.
Cool, thanks, Chris. Next one is there a way to integrate Compose with paging library 2 or 3?
Yes, I can tell you that we already have merged, like quite recently, an integration of Compose lazy column with paging 3, so it will be available in one of the next opus.
Great, that's great news. So, got a question on testing now. What are the plans for testing composables? Will we be able to finally remove emulators from the UI testing pipeline and test composable trees in headless environments in isolation without the inherent flakiness of a device?
Sure, I'll take this one. First of all, thanks for this question. This is something we've been talking about since day one, actually. However, it's easier said than done because right now there are some dependencies with Android that would have to be decoupled first. The options for this are Desktop Compose or Compose Desktop. I should have looked the name up before saying it. The second one is Layout Lib, which is what is used in Android Studio to provide the preview and the interactive preview, etc., or something completely new. But right now, we're just working on making sure that the APIs are solid and we don't have current plans to support this. But it's definitely something that would be super welcome, I think.
Nice, great. This is a good one. Is still using fragments to have multiple screens and navigation the way to go with Compose, or should Compose apps be a single activity with Compose alongside?
I'll take this. So we actually go for this in our talk tomorrow. Manuel and I talk about Compose-resistant apps. But for a quick overview, I think it depends where you're coming from. So if you're starting a brand new app, then going single activity and all in on Compose is probably a good thing, as it's likely to be kind of the future solution. But as Manu and Jose mentioned earlier, navigation is still in its very early stages, and we're still working on the kind of DI story. So if you want to use Hilt at the moment, kind of really got to use fragments to be able to inject into. But if you're coming from an existing app, the advice is probably you're probably going to be migrating piece by piece, so fragment by fragment, similar to what the Kotlin story was as you migrated. So I think it's more maintainable doing that way. So if you're going to be doing that, then doing it by fragment is probably a good way. And so, yeah, migrate each fragment, and then at the end, once we have navigation, all the other stories ironed out, then we can remove the fragment layer and then pump in navigation and all that stuff. So that's probably the way. I'd say it depends where you're coming from, but fragments isn't a bad solution right now.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Next on to some material theming. Is there an example of extending the material theme colors package to include my own colors? For example, splash logo color. I used to be able to add new color attributes to my theme when using XML. Or does my app theme need a new custom colors provider similar to what it has for images?
Yeah, I can take this one. So the colors class that we have, which models materials color set, is a kind of final class. It's not really designed for extension, and that's intentional. We very much designed our implementation of material design to be just that, to be exactly that, like a kind of very kind of true implementation of material design, because that enables us to make it much easier for you to work with material, like, you know, to have strong type safety and guarantees about the types you're using in your theming. The downside to that approach is it's harder to extend it. You can do things like adding custom extension properties to the colors object if you really want, but that only gets you so far. The real answer here is that one of my favorite things about Compose is that while we provide an implementation material, it's actually nothing special about it. You can and should like create your own design theming kind of constructs, your own kind of like strongly typed objects, and you can copy the way that the things that we do, like hosting those in an ambient we talked about before, and retrieving them in order to kind of retrieve those. So kind of it depends on how far. You can probably get away with a little bit of extension material theme if you just want to like alter a few things around the edges. But if you're actually trying to build something more custom, more bespoke, you're probably better off just building your own strongly typed objects and doing the same things that material does in order to host them, and yeah, getting better type support throughout.
To add extra that, Nick created the JetSnack sample, which goes through a lot of this as an example.
Yeah, all those samples are really great. So if you're looking for more information on the answer to that question, I'd definitely recommend checking those out. So the next question is, how is the Compose team doing user tests to evaluate the framework's API?
I can take this one. We've been working a lot on that since the beginning of our development of Compose. So we started with very focused user testing, like very short sessions, testing individual features like for 30 minutes and seeing the impact and how they would work with developers. And as we have evolved and Compose has become more full of feature and stable, we have increased this testing to, first it was 30 minutes, then 90 minutes, then 3 days, and then 3 weeks. Now we're working with a few partners to see how it actually works in production apps and on a longer time scale. So it's a very tight loop. And the other thing that we do is we also have a lot of internal testing. So all the sample apps serve the purpose of helping developers understand Compose, but also are also meant to give us a lot of feedback, and they provided a lot of feedback in the development.
Yeah, and I think seeing how the Compose API has been changing throughout the different versions, I think it's definitely clear that all that feedback's been actionable, which is really great to see. So next question is, what are the plans for accessibility?
I guess I can take this one as well. Accessibility is one of our top priorities. So if you try Compose now, you will see that it's not quite there yet. I would say the plumbing is before we go stable. We have a very simple vision, which is it should come out of the box. If you build the Compose apps following the best practices and the recommended components, your app will be accessible without you doing anything else. This is our vision. We really hope, we're really working hard to get to this so that developers don't have to make extra effort. So we'll keep the API surface very, very simple, but hopefully powerful and with great user experience for anyone using the apps.
Cool. There's also a couple of questions around Talkback and asking if services like Talkback will be updated to accommodate Compose and if they'll be able to handle the composables in a backwards compatibility fashion.
We are making Compose work with Talkback. It's what I refer to as the plumbing. So our goal is that just like you shouldn't be able to see the difference between using material components with Compose or the old MDC ones. You can mix them together and the end user will not see the difference. What we're working towards is that even if you're using assistive technologies, you will not know the difference between Compose or something developed with Views. So the idea is, yeah, the answer is yes. We're not really adapting Talkback, we're adapting Compose, but yes.
Great. That sounds great. Yeah, no, really looking forward to see that part of working with Compose really well. So next question is, how will Compose be integrated with other Android UI features such as motion layout?
I'll take this one. So motion layout, I mean, you might have saw Nicola and John's talk earlier about constraint layout 2.1. And Nicola mentioned that we are working on motion layout for Compose. We already have constraint layout in Compose, and you can try out the new DSL. It's really good. So yeah, we already have that in Compose. As to other UI features, it depends what you're talking about. If there's anything missing that you feel is, underbaked or is just missing in terms of other UI features, feel free to raise bugs, get in contact with us on the Compose channel on Kotlin Lang Slack. But feel free to let us know if there's anything missing.
Great, sounds great. In a similar fashion, next question is there going to be Jetpack Compose support for things such as Android TV, Wear OS, large screen devices?
I'll take this. So as you know, we're still in alpha, and like our main goal, we want to really focus on getting a 1.0 out there. And that 1.0 is focused on phone. Like what we really want to nail down is we're doing phones, we want to do phones great. But obviously we do have this long-term vision of we do want Compose to be the way you build UI on Android. And so we will work through those. I can't promise in what timeline, like we really need to nail phone first, but we are really excited about what can Compose do for all of these in the long term.
I'm a big fan of Android TV, so I look forward to being able to build apps for Android TV in the future with Compose. So we've got a question on performance, and the person's curious to know how the performance of Jetpack Compose would be when compared to things such as an XML layout.
I'll start this one and then hand it over to Andrey. So it's hard to compare to XML because we're very, very different. We've been comparing ourselves to the view system a lot, so we want to make sure we use the current view system as a baseline. In that sense, measurement and layout were already actually faster. So we've already optimized way beyond what the view system did, but there's other parts to a frame. And so there are still parts where we're lagging a bit behind. We're working on those and we're working on optimizing all of that. A big win is we're not inflating views from resources. So that's already kind of a checkbox. We already gained a lot on that. We still have work to do in like composition, for example. It's still lagging behind, but we will get there. Andrey, I know you've been doing a bunch of performance work.
Yes, basically I can add that our goal is to be faster or at least have the same performance as views in general. And we obviously not yet here, but we are going in this direction. And there are a lot of different things. So for example, if you take about lazy columns, which is kind of analog of recycle view, in Compose we don't need to recycle anything. We don't have such complex abstractions as views. So that's completely different, but we are trying to make it as fast as it worked before, or even faster.
Nice. Yeah, it's going to be an important topic when we're building apps and trying to make them efficient for our users. So definitely a great thing to keep in mind. Cool. The next one is, how do you see the evolution of Jetpack Compose going?
I'm not quite sure how to answer this, but beautifully, perhaps? I don't know. I'm going to pivot this a bit to say that we really are listening to feedback. So we're evolving the toolkit like in response to what you need out there. So we really want this to be, the right foundations for the next 10 plus years of building Android applications. So I'm going to turn this into a plug that if you haven't tried it out, if you're kind of like holding off, waiting until 1.0 perhaps to start checking out Compose, then I'd really encourage you to start taking a look earlier. And the reason being that, yes, it's an unbundled library, so we are able to make changes, after going 1.0 and so on. But, the software, it's only going to get harder and harder the more things we get built up on top of each other. So which is to say we're in a real sweet spot right now where the toolkit is kind of complete enough that you can start building, start trying out in your real use cases in your applications, and understand where it works for you, or if there's something missing, if there's an API or some shapes of combining different APIs is problematic for you. Then it's a really great time to let us know that now, because I think we're more able to kind of get those kind of changes in now before we do kind of like hit higher levels of stability. So yeah, I'm going to pivot this to say that we're going to keep on working on this. We're building right now, focused on achieving everything we want for a stable 1.0 release at some point in 2021. That's our goal of the team. But we want to make sure that we build the right thing for your application. So please try it out. File feedback on the issue tracker, or join us on Slack. You can find it all from the Compose homepage on developer.android.com. Anyone else want to have a...
Sorry, Nick, to add to that, one of the big changes we've had since the Vue system is we're trying to not get into the critical path of developers. So before, if you needed something that Recycler Vue didn't support, like we had to go and implement it for you. Just the way of how Compose works, as long as we get the basics right, you can build on top of it. And we've kind of gotten ourselves out of that critical path so that if there's a component missing, if we haven't done app bars yet and you suddenly want them, we do have them, but if we didn't, like, it's really easy for you to just go and build that yourself, as long as we've given you the basic building blocks that you need. And that's where our focus really is now, is making sure that all those core pieces are working, the accessibility is there, that the input system's there, the animations are there, because once that's there, you can build anything. And we're trying to make sure we're not a blocker. And that's really important for us, because that means Compose can evolve wherever developers need it to go.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really exciting to be able to, push forward our apps without being so dependent on the UI framework and the changes that come with it. So in a Compose world, are alert dialog and dialog fragments still the best way to show dialogues, or do I now need to implement those using composables too? How do you then pop the Compose dialog over an existing hierarchy?
So actually, we've had support for dialogues and alert dialogues for quite a while, I think since last summer. One of our interns implemented this support. So from Compose, we have an alert dialog composable that you can use. It will actually pop up an Android dialog. So we're doing all the plumbing for you, and we're doing all of the dismissing for you as well, so that you can use it from the declarative syntax. You can choose to use that, or you can choose to handle your own Android dialog if that's what you prefer. So kind of both options are on the table at the moment. If it doesn't work, please do file bugs and feedback.
Thank you. So next one seems like I remember reading that Compose can support targeting skier. Are there any future plans of being able to use Compose to build true write-once cross-platform apps similar to Flutter?
This is an interesting question. So actually, Android bundles Skia as an operating system. Like, we have Skia on Android, and the Vue system that calls into Skia. So for example, when you're trying to draw text on a canvas, like that just ends up calling into Skia to draw that text. Like, that's just part of our pipeline. So Compose uses Skia, and that Compose uses the Vue APIs and the render node APIs, and those use Skia behind it. We have no plans of actually bundling Skia on the library itself. Just that would create like a huge amount of APK size burden on everyone that we just don't really need, because we know Skia is there on Android, and we have a history of like anything that we've needed to backport, well, we've done that work. So yes, we use Skia. We have no plans of actually bundling it. Something that may be interesting for whoever asked this, the JetBrains desktop efforts that you may have been following on our code base, they actually managed to to remove our graphics pipeline, and they plumbed in their own version of Skia. So it is possible. We don't plan on doing it, but it is a possibility out there.
Great. That's very exciting. So I think this time, and that's all the questions we had prior to the panel on Twitter, but I think we're going to switch to Slido now, so we can take some questions that have been asked through there. Cool, great. I guess we can start from the top and work our way down. Is support for lean back coming soon?
I guess we sort of answered this earlier. Not soon. We would love to get to a point where all Android UI is built with Compose, but not working on it at the moment.
Cool. People are enjoying the talk by the looks of it. Is there a tool to convert an XML layout into a composable function? This could be useful for migration purposes.
So funny enough, we used to have at the very, very beginning of Compose, I think before we even went open, we had a converter. It turns out it's very misleading. Like the paradigms are so different that the expectations that developers had when they converted their XML into Kotlin code, things broke because it's not actually the same. And so we decided that the expectations that that tool were bringing with it were too strong at that moment. So we decided to move away from that. At the moment, we don't have plans on building one. I think there's someone in the community who has built one. Nick, you may know more.
Yes, there is. No, I can't remember. It's called Recomposer, I think. That might be it. But no,
Sebastian,
I don't know.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice. So as Compose is still being composed more and more into a production-ready library, certain things are likely to change before it hits beta. How much of what we know about Compose will remain as we know it, and how much may we need to relearn? Great question.
I can take this. It depends on how closely you're following RCLs. We are doing some changes between now and beta. We're experimenting with coroutines. Coroutines were suddenly made available to us with Kotlin 1.4 landing at exactly the same time as we went to alpha. So there's some APIs that will change in that space between alpha and beta. We hope it's not going to be very breaking to everyone, but we do think it's an investment for like better APIs. We want to make sure like gearing towards beta, we are confident in the APIs we're putting out there. As we said before, feedback is really important. We think this is worth the breakage that it will cause. So if you really want to see what's going on, you can follow us on the Android open source project. We do everything in the open. There's some changes landing like literally in the last few weeks.
The other thing to add to that is that the team is trying to use Kotlin's opt-in annotations where possible. So for APIs which are change, we know they're going to change. So if you find yourself using opt-in, you should be aware that those APIs may actually change in the future.
But add to that, like we don't foresee any massive API shape changes. Like we definitely are looking at ways we can use coroutines to build better APIs, especially for anything which abstracts over time. So think things like gestures or animation handling. I'm quite excited about what we can do with using components, using coroutines, excuse me, to especially orchestrate between those kind of things. So there's going to be some changes there probably. But lots of the major shapes of the API, the declarative syntax, the kind of like passing of properties around and so on, it's pretty settled, and a lot of the UI components are actually pretty built out as well. So I would say, a lot of stuff isn't going to change as well.
And the next one is definitely something that's been on my mind a bit as well. Is there still going to be an active work on the framework views in the long run, or would the platform rather focus on optimizing the low-level bits that Compose will be building on?
I guess no one's volunteering for this. You are talking to the Compose team. So we are very excited about Compose. We're putting a lot of effort in Compose. But the reality is we can't expect the entirety of our community to move to Compose in a very short time frame, right? Like we are realistic. We always look at how Kotlin adoption happened and how it was incremental. And we assume Compose, or we hope Compose will have a similar story where we encourage people to take it incrementally, which means we can't abandon views, right? Like there is still some work that needs to happen in that space just to make sure like we can't just suddenly switch. So we are doing some work. We're not necessarily the happiest when we're doing that work because we are the Compose team and we love what we're doing now. But we're trying to find a balance between both.
In a similar vein, do you believe that Google will adopt a Jetpack first approach in future, similar to how they went Kotlin first?
I guess I can take this one. I would say it will really depend on the response from the developers. For us, adopting Kotlin first was really in response to the fact that the developer community was really keen on that. So we supported that, and then we saw massive adoption. So again, you're talking to the Compose team. At the moment, there are no clear plans for that, but we will have to see how the developer community adopts Compose.
There's also, I don't know if the question was about just Jetpack in general or Compose. If you're asking about Jetpack in general, like, are we just doing things in Jetpack first? That's kind of a hard question to answer. Like Compose, we clearly went that way. And we said, it actually started from the idea of let's unbundle the toolkit from the platform so that we can have a library. It allows us to iterate much faster. So we did go down that path. It doesn't mean we can do that for everything. There's a lot of things that are very tied to the Android operating system, and they need to stay there, right? Like our tech stack is deeply rooted into the Android framework. We can't just suddenly rip it out into a library. So I think there's always going to be a balance. Things that we can do as a library without affecting the framework, it detaches us from a year-long release cycle and from not being able to put it out there as quickly as we can to developers. So we do prefer libraries, at least especially on our side of the team. But it doesn't mean we can do it for everything. So there's a lot of trade-offs involved.
Cool. So the next one is on Jetpack Compose, can you get different resources, such as density pixels, based on different qualifiers for landscape, portrait, and so on?
Yeah, I can take this one. So we have a few helper methods that helps you hook into the view system. So we have something like dimension resource, stuff like that. So there are usually something like called resource as a suffix that is going to help you get those dimensions or whatever you need from the view system. Like, unfortunately, at the moment, you still need to use XML for that to define all those different variants. But we'll try to see how that plays nicely with Compose in the future.
And you can actually... Go on, you go.
Okay. One thing I was going to add to that is I'm actually really excited about what we can do in Compose that we couldn't do before, which is make responsive components. So before it was always very easy to change dimensions and stuff based on the entire screen real estate, but it was actually pretty hard to create similar switching behavior based on how big an individual component was. So think about if you're laying out like a master detail screen, the actual space available to say the detail pane is more interesting than the entire screen real estate at that point. That's where Compose really shines. I think we have some composables in there, like checkout with constraints, for example, which will actually make available at composition time the size available to just your component, which enables you to build these kind of components which themselves can adapt to the size that they're dropped into. So you can use them, drop it into, a screen, a large screen here, and it will look different than dropping it into a small screen over there to make these kind of really responsive components. So I'm pretty excited about that, which we could never really, didn't really have a great answer for in the view system.
To circle back to the original question, we actually have the configuration in an ambient called configuration ambient, and you can modify that at runtime, and that will affect the resources that you get out, like dimension resource and color resource and all the other resources you get. So if you want to say get the resources for portrait, you can modify the configuration ambient, and then that will affect the any resources then retrieved. So yeah.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Really great information. Following on from that, what can we look forward to in the next release of Compose?
So it depends on what you consider next release. We are releasing artifacts every 2 weeks. So we're just on a regular cadence of every 2 weeks, putting a build out there for everyone. And that should just have like incremental updates. We don't really target much to these releases. If we're looking towards beta, which is our next big milestone, we're mostly looking at stabilizing things, finalizing APIs, really making sure the performance is there. So making sure we're starting to gear up that really stable product that we want to put out there. Nick, do you want to add better stuff?
Accessibility for me is a big one that we are aiming for beta, much improved accessibility story. The coding stuff I think we talked about already in this panel. I'm really excited about some of that landing. I think that's going to be pretty cool. And also the maturation of the kind of lazy components. So those, were earlier, definitely at alpha stage. So if you're looking at the difference between alpha and beta, I think some of the lazy components, especially the lazy DSL, if you haven't seen that, for specifying recycling type lists, is really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to new features landing there too.
Yeah, and if the question is about the technically next release, you can take a look at the Compose samples repo, where we push everything that is going to be pushed with the next release. So we already have a dev alpha 05 branch that is going to have everything that is coming next week, hopefully.
Nice. Looking forward to that. So next one is, will the layout inspector work, or will we have a tool like that to debug?
Don't all jump.
We're working on it.
I was going to pivot to you. Do you actually have some equivalent support in the previews already? So using the kind of app preview annotation, you can already like hover over stuff and click on things and click through to kind of do similar kind of like drill down behavior that you had a layout inspector. I'll be interested in hearing more exactly what it is you're looking to get here though.
Cool. So the presentations on Compose have been mind-blowing at droidCon. How do you envision average Android development teams learning Compose without writing horrible Compose code and avoiding common pitfalls, as a lot of things are changing?
Joe, I think you can take this one, since you've been super active and trying every single API. Maybe you can tell people how to do it.
Give it a go. Yeah. So to Compose. So the way I'm doing it is like taking my existing side projects and just starting small. Like how, I don't know, say I've got a fragment or a custom view, like how can I switch that out for composables, and how does it work? And similar things of like taking the live data and how can I take the data that's being emitted by that and hooking it into a Compose layout. It's like doing it small setup at a time. I actually took my company's app as well and took like just one small part of the screen and see how I could convert that and learning how it's all working. I think that's a nice way of doing it, because you're not like trying to build a whole app from scratch or take on a big project. You're just taking a small part of what already exists and doing it that way. I think as well, like that just saves you a lot of time and yeah, stops you running into any pitfalls. Things are changing quick though, and as you've probably seen, like in some of my blog posts, like things are sometimes out of date after a few weeks. I have to go back to change stuff. So yeah, things are moving, but I think the overall idea and concept is going to be the same. So I think Nick pointed out before, like it's a good time to start diving into it. So the approach and concept will stay the same. It's just being aware of any little API changes. But yeah, start small and just start plugging into stuff that you already have that is existing.
And if I could add to that, a plug for the pathway we put together as well. So if you're not familiar with pathways, if you go to the main Jetpack Compose homepage, which is developer.android.com/Jetpack Compose, there's a big plug in the middle for like a learning pathway, which is really we've put together like a linear progression for learning Compose, like what is there right now. So it pulls together some videos, some documentation pages, and also we have, I think, 5 code labs, which will walk you through learning. I think we have basics, layouts, theming, state, and one on migration as well from existing apps. So I really hope that that pathway will help you and your teams in your learning kind of journey as well.
Yeah, and I would add something there. Look carefully at the samples that we have. The samples have varying degrees of complexity, and that is on purpose. So there are more simple ones that just help you get acquainted with just the UI part. Then there is a holistic sample that is Jet News that dives deeper into architecture and so on. So do look at that. I would say that we know there is going to be a learning curve because using Compose might impact somehow how you think about your app, how you think about the architecture of the app. So it is a part of what we are studying right now with the user testing that we talked about just before in the panel. So we are listening to what the pitfalls are, to what shows up as you use Compose more and more in production apps. So we will definitely have more documentation and more guidance coming for these reasons, for these topics.
Cool, great. I think that's us for time now. Answer all the questions we can this time. So thanks everyone for your questions. Some really great information here. There's still some talks on Compose tomorrow from the team, so be sure to check those out. And yeah, if you haven't looked at Compose yet already, now's a great time, and check out the alphas and be sure to give feedback where you can. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the conference tomorrow, and see you all later.